Hello, we would like to welcome you to this webinar. It is going to provide an overview of the National Thematic Inspection Report findings, literacy and English within Scotland's curriculum. My colleagues and I were part of the writing team for this thematic. My name is Susan McDade. I'm one of His Majesty's inspectors with a background in secondary English teaching.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Wadley and I'm one of His Majesty's inspectors and I have a background in primary.
Hello, my name's Kath Crombie. I'm one of His Majesty's inspectors with a background in early years and primary.
The focus of this thematic inspection emerged from several factors, including the international comparisons recommended in the OECD report, Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence into the Future, and national policy priorities. Included in the OECD recommendations was a curriculum review. It was recommended that Scotland should develop a systematic approach to curriculum review. It said Scotland should consider establishing a curriculum review cycle with a planned timeframe and specific review agenda led by the specialist standalone agency. Additionally, HMIE inspection evidence has revealed variability in the quality of how settings and schools within different local authorities deliver Scotland's literacy and English curriculum. This has a direct impact on the learning outcomes of children and young people. To support the curriculum improvement cycle, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Education announced a national thematic inspection of literacy and English. The purpose was to provide evidence of what was working well and what needed to improve in the curriculum. We found strengths in each sector, and you can read about these in detail in the report. However, aspects of the literacy and English curriculum and the quality of learning and teaching in literacy and English need to continue improving. Today, we will provide you with a summary of the main findings, what's working well, and also the national challenges. So why does literacy and English matter in Scotland's curriculum? Early communication and language and literacy in English are a foundation for learning and support children and young people to develop skills for life, learning and work. Our ability to use language lies at the centre of the development and expression of our emotions, our thinking, our learning, and our sense of personal identity. Way back in 2006, Building the Curriculum 1 highlighted that the development of children and young people's literacy skills is the responsibility of all teachers. It stated that literacy offers an essential passport to learning, helping young people to achieve to the full and be ready for active involvement in society and work. When children and young people have competence in language and good literacy skills, they can gain access to all areas of learning. Effective language and literacy skills enable young people to contribute to developing creative and enterprising ideas and communities. And competence and confidence in literacy, including competence in grammar, spelling and the spoken word, are essential for progress in all areas of the curriculum. Because of this, all teachers have responsibility for promoting language and literacy development. Every teacher in each area of the curriculum needs to find opportunities to encourage children and young people to explain their thinking, debate their ideas, and read and write at a level that will help them to develop their language skills further. All of these points remain true 20 years on and should lie at the heart of our literacy and English curriculum in Scotland. So what are the main findings? Across all sectors, the main findings are nurturing relationships and literacy-rich environments support children's listening and talking, reading and writing. Literacy learning is strongest when listening and talking, reading and writing are linked to real life and meaningful contexts. Reading and writing are generally more consistently taught and assessed than listening and talking. Listening and talking need clearer teaching, assessment and progression across stages. And reading for pleasure should be encouraged and developed It not only supports learning in the classroom, but also supports wellbeing.
Thank you, Susan. The report also identifies national challenges, which we'll go into in more detail in this presentation. The key national priorities identified in the report are assessment and moderation, the development of children and young people's listening and talking skills, and ensuring that all teachers fulfil their responsibility for literacy and English across the curriculum in secondary schools. Staff in schools and settings need to consider and discuss how they will address aspects of leadership and improvement priorities, and how staff can support and develop transition at all stages, within and between stages in schools and settings. The first challenge identified is around assessment and moderation practices. The use of assessment information to inform planning in literacy and English is currently working well. Across schools and settings, we found that practitioners and teachers use a wide range of formative and summative assessments to assess children and young people's progress in reading and writing. They use data gathered in such assessments to influence and inform their planning of literacy and English. In many early learning and childcare settings, staff observe children closely and use their observations of children's learning to plan next steps. In schools and settings, staff discuss the results of such assessment at tracking meetings and identify gaps in children's progress or knowledge, and many provide targeted interventions. In some schools, teachers use pre- and post-assessment outcomes to successfully measure the progress children are making because of targeted literacy interventions. However, we found that highly effective moderation remains a challenge nationally. Moderation activities within schools help staff develop a shared understanding of standards, particularly in writing. Staff in all schools and settings now need to engage more regularly in moderation activities beyond their own schools or settings to improve the consistency of assessment, professional judgments, and to ensure alignment with national standards. In most secondary schools, assessment and moderation of attainment in literacy is limited to the English departments, and there's scope for teachers to gather evidence for the assessment of literacy across the curriculum. We also found that there needs to be a more systematic assessment of literacy in English, and I will discuss this in the next slide. Currently, planning for literacy in English in all sectors frequently lacks explicit focus on listening and talking skill development and assessment. While practitioners and teachers use progression pathways or developmental milestones to plan listening and talking, most don't yet teach specific skills or assess listening and talking well enough. Across all sectors, we found that staff plan engaging programmes of learning that support the delivery of listening and talking within the literacy and English curriculum. Practitioners and teachers now need to identify the gaps in children and young people's progress in listening and talking and plan explicit teaching of listening and talking skills. They need to plan assessment of children and young people's application of these skills more regularly and more robustly in a wide range of new and relevant contexts. By enhancing assessment in this area, this should support a more balanced and accurate picture of children and young people's progress across all aspects of literacy. Across schools, staff support children to develop listening and talking skills through pupil voice groups, debates, presentations, and collaborative learning, to name a few. All of these are essential for the effective development of children and young people's listening and talking skills. And it's important that teachers identify and teach specific listening skills and talking skills for children and young people to use and develop in such activities. Since the outset of Curriculum for Excellence, literacy across the curriculum has been identified as the responsibility of all. Across Scotland, staff are increasingly using progression pathways or developmental milestones to support literacy and English learning. Practitioners and teachers are using frameworks aligned with Curriculum for Excellence and national benchmarks or developmental milestones well to plan learning. And this ensures that learning for most children and young people builds on their prior knowledge. It supports progress from early years through to secondary education. In almost all secondary schools, English teachers use curriculum plans in the BGE that reflect progression pathways linked to Curriculum for Excellence experiences and outcomes, and most of these are aligned with national benchmarks. Across settings in schools, staff provide a range of relevant and motivating activities in the curriculum in and beyond the classroom. Children and young people engage in literacy and English activities in relevant contexts, such as writing to local services about issues that affect them. These activities motivate children and young people and provide them with a clear purpose to their learning. However, teachers should ensure that children and young people are able to consistently apply skills they have learned during literacy and English lessons in other areas of the curriculum. And this could help them to apply their learning better across the curriculum and link to the world of work. Practitioners and teachers are making increasingly effective use of digital learning resources to support children and young people's literacy development. In almost all settings in schools, digital tools such as phonic apps, interactive storytelling platforms, and speech-to-text software support children and young people to develop reading fluency, comprehension, and writing confidence. Teachers are becoming more confident in using learning applications and are developing their knowledge and skills of how digital tools can support literacy progression. And across all sectors, there's a clear understanding of the need to balance the use of digital and non-digital resources. When children and young people are involved in planning their literacy, this improves motivation and consistency. Classrooms and outdoor areas in settings and primary schools are typically well resourced with books, mark-making tools and visual supports. And children and young people enjoy these literacy-rich environments and can provide examples of how this impacts positively on their learning. In all secondary schools, senior phase courses are planned around the requirements of Qualifications Scotland courses. Staff in English departments plan their curriculum in the senior phase to meet the needs of learners and offer them appropriate and progressive pathways. Teachers in almost all English departments plan their broad general education curriculum to align with Curriculum for Excellence experiences and outcomes, while also reflecting skills that will support young people to be well equipped for their Qualifications Scotland courses. However, we found that across Scotland, secondary teachers across all curriculum areas need to provide opportunities for young people to develop and apply their literacy skills across the curriculum. And they need to support learners to transfer skills beyond discrete lessons and beyond English lessons.
Thank you, Kath. An area worth discussing is the impact leadership has on the quality of literacy in English learning and teaching and the literacy in English curriculum. In many schools, staff prioritise the development of aspects of literacy, including it as a priority on improvement plans. And this is supporting more consistency in the planning and delivery of the literacy in English curriculum. In high-performance schools, senior leaders use research to develop literacy policies. These clarify expectations and promote a shared approach to literacy across the curriculum. A few primary schools have literacy leads or champions who support staff and share effective practice. They ensure that staff are aware of current research and approaches to support children. And this results in a more consistent approach to the learning and teaching of literacy and English curriculum across the school. The participation of teachers and practitioners in literacy-based moderation activities, both within schools and with colleagues in other school settings, has increased. And this is having a positive impact on practitioner and teacher confidence in assessing children and young people's progress and attainment. But while planned moderation activities are becoming more frequent, these events are often a verification of assessment judgments. Senior leaders in most schools have identified more moderation activities are a priority. Staff in all schools and settings need to engage more regularly in moderation activities beyond their own school or setting to improve the consistency of assessment judgments and ensure alignment with national standards. Across all sectors, there is a need to ensure that the full moderation cycle becomes an integral part of curriculum planning for effective learning and teaching. Transition arrangements between primary and secondary schools often include activities that are identified as moderation events. And typically, these events involve secondary teachers working with primary colleagues to develop that shared understanding of attainment levels. To ensure improvement, senior leaders should extend these activities to include secondary teachers from all curricular areas. This will support teachers to understand what children and young people's prior attainment levels mean. They will then be able to apply this knowledge to meet the needs of all learners. And there is also scope for practitioners in early learning and childcare settings to moderate out with their own setting, including working with primary 1 teachers. And this will support the development of a shared understanding of progression across early level. Local authorities and senior leaders need to plan how to best support all staff in secondary schools to develop their knowledge and confidence of the literacy curriculum. Some secondary teachers, other than English teachers, do not yet have a secure understanding of how they can support young people to develop literacy skills in their curricular area. Local authorities and senior leaders need to plan how to best support all staff in secondary schools to develop their knowledge of the literacy curriculum. Embedding this knowledge will help to improve outcomes for children and young people in all aspects of the curriculum. It goes without saying that the 2 previous mentioned points, prioritising literacy development and increasing moderation, should also support an increase in teacher and practitioner confidence and knowledge. We also found that staff who engaged in training delivered by external partners, such as speech and language therapists or national programmes, had increased their confidence and improved their teaching approaches in literacy, English and communication. And that this is leading to more targeted support for children and young people and a stronger understanding of effective literacy pedagogy. In most settings in schools, there is a need for senior and middle leaders to develop further staff's understanding of high-quality formative assessment. This includes co-creating success criteria with children and young people. And in some schools, the steps to success are too broad, making it difficult for children and young people to understand how well they are doing. Staff should improve the quality and consistency of written and oral feedback so that it clearly supports children's learning in literacy and English. Staff should plan high-quality assessments in literacy and English that allow children and young people to apply their learning in new and unfamiliar contexts. Another area worth discussing is how transition arrangements can improve literacy and English outcomes. Almost all schools share information regarding literacy levels and attainment as part of whole school tracking tools. A few clusters have developed a full moderation cycle based on a common topic, and this is supporting young people's transition to secondary well. In a few primary schools, teachers facilitate purposeful transition meetings to pass attainment and progress information on to the new teacher at the end of each year. And this ensures that staff gain knowledge about children and build successfully on their prior learning. However, whilst there are strong examples of engaging transitions programmes between ELC and primary and secondary, staff need to include more detailed and focused information at these transition points. This should help practitioners and teachers to avoid repeating topics and resources. Repetition can lead to a lack of challenge and interest for children and young people. In secondary schools, transition planning should involve a wider number of subject specialists in literacy and English transition planning. In secondary schools, transition should involve a wider number of subject specialists in literacy and English transition planning. This should support all teachers in planning courses that meet the literacy needs of all children and young people. Transition should ensure progression, smooth progression that sustains learner engagement and avoids unnecessary repetition. For example, practitioners in early learning and childcare settings need to share clear details at times of transition to primary school about which stories, songs and rhymes have been covered in the early learning and childcare setting. This should help teachers in primary 1 to build on children's prior learning and avoid repetition.
Thanks, Jennifer. As you'll be aware, there are successes and challenges across all sectors, and you can read about all of these in greater detail in the report. For the purpose of this presentation, we have selected one success and one challenge from each sector to consider in more depth, and to show the variety of findings in the Literacy and English report. So, moving on to early years education. In most settings, staff develop attractive, motivating, literacy-rich indoor and outdoor play environments which support children to develop their literacy skills as they are curious and creative in their play and learning. Staff make effective use of these play environments to support the development of children's communication, listening and talking skills. They provide a wide range of provocations that inspire children to discuss and explain their learning. For example, children explain in detail to adults what they have constructed with a range of natural materials. Staff support children well to develop a love of reading. They provide a wide range of non-fiction and fiction books which children enjoy accessing on their own, with their peers or with adults. And most children benefit from opportunities to develop reading skills in all areas of the nursery. For instance, children read recipes to support them as they play in mud kitchens, which helps them read with a purpose beyond reading stories. Almost all staff plan a few provocations to promote early writing skills throughout the curriculum. They provide a range of learning activities and provocations for children to practice these skills both indoors and outdoors. However, these are not yet of a consistently high quality or quantity in most settings. In a few settings, children enjoy using their emergent writing skills to label resources or write stories, and practitioners in a few settings are particularly successful in using floor books to record children's ideas and thoughts about what they are learning and what they would like to learn next. Children enjoy writing their thoughts in these books using their mark making and emergent skills. This gives children a relevant and meaningful context for mark making and writing. However, there is still scope for improvement in this area. Staff need to improve how children are supported in developing their emergent and pre-writing skills. They need to provide more mark-making and writing resources throughout settings for children to access, and they need to provide stronger commentary and interactions to help children to develop their pre-writing skills.
In primary schools, teachers use structured programmes for teaching phonics, grammar, spelling and handwriting. Where practice is highly effective, teachers refer to prior learning in these areas and give children feedback linked to the agreed steps to success. This supports children to see the progress they are making and their next steps in learning. In most schools, teachers plan writing lessons through real-life contexts and across a range of genres. They mostly plan discrete learning activities that teach grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and most children develop their skills well through these lessons. However, teachers need to ensure that children consistently transfer these skills into their extended writing. This should support them in improving the fluency, presentation, and handwriting of all their writing.
Thank you, Jennifer. When planning the reading curriculum, often English teachers consult with young people regarding the types of texts and topics they would like to study. This consultation can take a variety of forms, from very formal consultations across all year groups to more ad hoc discussions with individual classes. Where this is happening well, young people report that they are much more engaged in their learning because it's relevant to their interests. They particularly enjoy studying topics and texts about where they live. Young people highlighted how they felt more engaged in the topics and the texts because they reflect their lives and they can see themselves in the stories and in the activities that they're taking part in. Young people also feel listened to when these things happen in the classroom and that their preferences are being considered and are being valued. An increasing number of young people are transitioning to mainstream secondary school whilst working at CFE first and second levels. However, there is no clear understanding of how attainment levels link with young people's ability to access course materials and resources. That understanding is out with the English departments. Teachers need to have a greater understanding of what achievement of a literacy level means and how this will impact course planning and pupil progression. By developing a clearer understanding of this, young people will benefit from a curriculum that better matches their needs and supports them to achieve more. Across the curriculum, the pace of learning can be too slow. This is more acute across the BGE phase. Young people are often engaged in the same activities across lessons and all work at the same pace regardless of each individual's needs. Young people who complete tasks and activities ahead of their peers are often given more of the same type of activity to do. They would benefit from extension tasks that would deepen their learning, and so teachers should give consideration to this when planning lessons and courses.
Thank you, Susan. We visited a small sample of special schools, and as you'll be aware, across these establishments and provisions, there is a very wide spectrum of need. What we did find was that in special schools, staff establish strong, nurturing relationships with children and young people. They know this is crucial to supporting children and young people to communicate with confidence. Staff know and understand the individual needs of the children and young people they are teaching very well, and this includes having a sound knowledge of their communication and language needs. Teachers plan individualised education programmes to meet the needs of all learners. These plans include targets for literacy in English, communication and language when required. Teachers take a team around the child approach and plan these individualised education programmes in collaboration with multi-agency partners and parents. In special settings, staff continue to engage with professional learning related to communication and language, such as British Sign Language or assistive digital technology. This includes training provided by speech and language therapy colleagues. Most support staff engage in purposeful professional learning about meeting the welfare needs of children and young people. And when we spoke with support staff, many identified they would benefit from further learning about meeting individual communication and language learning needs.
Thank you, Kath. Improving literacy in English education across Scotland is the responsibility of all involved in education. For this reason, the recommendations identified are for schools and settings, local authorities, national bodies and the Scottish Government to work together in driving the essential improvements. The report identified 7 national recommendations, and we'll give you time to read these through.
We would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation, and we welcome your feedback. You can scan the QR code on the screen in order to provide that feedback, and we look forward to reading that feedback in the future. Thank you.